My husband signed the settlement papers with the flourish of a man collecting trophies. He claimed the house, the business, and the luxury cars while I sat there and watched the ink dry. Then his lawyer leaned in and whispered a single sentence. Graham's smug smile shattered like cheap glass. He thought he was walking away with a fortune, but he had just lit a fuse. My name is Claire Whitman. I sat on the hard mahogany bench in the back of the courtroom and watched my husband dismantle our 14 years of marriage with the same aggressive efficiency he used to tear down historic neighborhoods. Graham Vance did not look like a man in the middle of a divorce. He looked like a conqueror accepting a surrender. He sat at the plaintiff's table, his spine rigid, his Italian suit tailored to within an inch of its life to accentuate his broad shoulders. The scratching of his fountain pen was the loudest sound in the room. It was a rhythmic, confident sound. Scritch, scratch, sign, flip. Scritch, scratch. He was signing away his freedom, but he thought he was signing a victory treaty. With every stroke of that gold-nibbed pen, he was claiming another trophy. The sprawling estate in the hills with the infinity pool he never swam in. The vintage Porsche he drove twice a year. The entirety of Vance Ridge Development, the company we had built from a single laptop on a kitchen table. He was taking it all. I remained perfectly still on the bench. I was 38 years old, but I felt ancient. I had dressed for the occasion in a shapeless gray cardigan and black slacks, the kind of outfit that renders a woman invisible. My face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing the dark circles I had carefully cultivated over the last sleepless month. No jewelry. My hands rested in my lap, bare and pale. I looked defeated. I looked like a woman who had been crushed under the weight of her husband's brilliance. That was exactly what Graham needed to see. He needed to believe he had won before the game had even started. Howard Klein, Graham's shark of an attorney, stood over him, sliding the documents across the polished wood with practiced speed. Klein was smiling, that tight, predatory grimace lawyers wear when they know they are billing $600 an hour to crush a housewife. Just the transfer of deeds now. Graham, Klein murmured, his voice smooth and oily. We are almost at the finish line. Graham smirked. He did not look at me. He had not looked at me since we walked into the building. He flipped the page, ready to claim the business accounts, the ones he had locked me out of 3 months ago. Then came the final addendum. This was the document my lawyer, Simone, had buried at the bottom of the stack. It looked standard, boring, just another piece of bureaucratic paper in a sea of legal jargon. Graham reached for it, his pen hovering like a hawk ready to dive. Klein leaned in. I saw the movement, sharp and sudden. He placed a hand on Graham's forearm, stopping the pen inches from the paper. Klein leaned close to Graham's ear, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the fine print one last time. Wait, Klein whispered, though in the silence of the room it carried like a shout. Graham, the wording here, on the liability clause. I saw Graham's back stiffen. He paused. For a second, the air in the room seemed to vanish. Graham looked down at the paper, really looked at it, and I watched the blood drain from his neck. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a flash of raw, animal panic. He gripped the pen so hard his knuckles turned white. Judge Holloway looked down from the bench, peering over his spectacles with impatience. Is there a problem? Mr. Vance, the judge asked, checking the clock on the wall. We have a full docket today. Graham swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed violently against his starch-stiff collar. He looked at Klein, then at the judge. He could not back down now. Not in front of the court. Not after he had spent months telling everyone in town that he was the visionary, the genius, the sole engine of our success. To stop now would be to admit he did not understand his own business. No, Graham stammered, his voice cracking. No, I mean, no, Your Honor. No problem. His hand trembled as he lowered the pen. It was just a micro tremor, invisible to everyone but the woman who had managed his stress levels and covered his mistakes for a decade. He signed. He wanted everything. I thought, a cold calm settling over me. So I gave him everything. He believed he was securing his empire. He thought he was collecting assets to display on his shelf like hunting trophies. He had no idea that he was actually assuming sole liability for a financial sinkhole that was already collapsing from the inside out. He was not inheriting a fortune. He was inheriting a fuse. Graham finished the signature and let go of the pen. It rolled off the edge of the table and hit the thin industrial carpet. Thud. It sounded exactly like the door of a trap closing shut. I was never the dreamer. I was the one who woke up early to check the weather forecast. I liked spreadsheets. I liked the clean, undeniable truth of a balanced ledger where liabilities met assets and the result was zero. Zero was safe. Zero meant you could sleep at night without staring at the ceiling fan, wondering if the bank was going to call in the morning. Graham Vance was different. When we met, he was not a tycoon. He was just a contractor with a rusted pickup truck and a smile that could convince a bank manager to ignore a credit score. He did not talk about quarterly taxes or risk assessment. He talked about skylines. He talked about legacy. He had a way of looking at a muddy, empty lot and describing a glass cathedral. We are going to build the new America. Claire, he used to tell me, his eyes bright with a manic sort of hope. I have the vision, but I need you to handle the rest. I was seduced by that future. I believed in the myth of Graham Vance before anyone else did. So I built the engine that powered his rocket. I became the invisible chief financial officer of Vance Ridge Development. To the outside world, we were the golden couple of the tri-state area. The local business journals called him a visionary and a pillar of the community. We lived in a 5-bedroom colonial renovation that was featured in regional magazines. We threw parties where Graham held court with a scotch in hand, laughing loudly at jokes made by city council members. He was the sun, radiating charisma and confidence. But while he was charming the zoning board, I was in the home office with the door shut. I was the one arguing with drywall suppliers over a 3% markup. I was the one tracking the insurance premiums, the payroll taxes, and the lien waivers. I made sure every permit was filed and every subcontractor was paid on time so they would not walk off the job. I kept the machine running. Slowly, however, I stopped being his partner. I started to fade. At ribbon-cutting ceremonies, photographers would politely ask me to step aside. "Just one of the man of the hour, please," they would say. I became furniture. I became Mrs. Vance, a prop to be wheeled out when he needed to look like a stable family man. Graham began to resent the reality I represented. He started to hate the messenger. Every time I brought him a profit and loss statement that showed a dip or warned him about cash flow, he took it as a personal insult. He wanted to buy expensive land deals on speculation. I wanted to pay off our existing loans. "You have no imagination." Claire, he would snap at me over dinner, slamming his fork down. "I am trying to expand. I am trying to build an empire here, and you are obsessing over petty cash. You are suffocating the business." His mother, Marla, made it worse. She was a woman who believed her son was God's gift to construction. She would come over for Sunday dinner, look at the spread I had cooked, and then turn her adoration solely to Graham. "She doesn't understand your spirit." "Graham," Marla would whisper, loud enough for me to hear while I cleared the plates. "You need to fly. And she is just holding onto your ankles like a weight." Ethan saw it all. My son is 16 now, but even at 12, he had learned the art of disappearing. He was not afraid of Graham hitting him because Graham was never violent like that. It was something colder. Graham was indifferent. He treated Ethan like an employee who was not performing well. Ethan stopped bringing his report cards home because Graham would only ask why he was not captain of the football team yet. Ethan retreated into his headphones and his room. watching our marriage disintegrate from the corners of the house with eyes that were too old and too tired for a teenage boy. He knew his father was a showman, and he knew I was the stagehand keeping the lights on. But nobody applauds the stagehand. They only cheer for the star. The first sign that my life was no longer my own appeared on a Monday morning in the form of a red text box on my laptop screen. Access denied. Contact administrator. For 10 years, I had been the administrator. I knew the passwords because I had created them. I tried again, typing slowly, thinking perhaps my fingers had slipped. Access denied. I walked into the kitchen where Graham was pouring his third cup of espresso. He did not look up from his phone. "Graham," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't get into the business operating account. I need to pay the cement supplier today or they are going to put a hold on the Riverview project." He took a sip of coffee. Unbothered. "I changed the passwords last night. New security protocols. The bank suggested it." "You locked me out of the company I manage," I asked. "You are stressed." "Claire," he said, finally looking at me with a pitying smile that made my skin crawl. "You have been making mistakes, little ones. But they add up. I am just simplifying things for you. You do not need to worry about the heavy lifting anymore." It was a lie so bold it took my breath away. But the humiliation was just beginning. 2 days later, a new truck pulled into the driveway. It was a custom-lifted heavy-duty pickup, jet black, costing easily $80,000. Graham called it branding. He said clients needed to see success to trust us. Yet, that same evening, he circled a line item on the credit card statement with a red Sharpie and tossed it onto the kitchen counter in front of me. $4.50 for organic strawberries, he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "We are bleeding cash. Claire, and you are shopping like a celebrity. Do you have any concept of fiscal responsibility?" I stood there, staring at the receipt, while the keys to his $80,000 truck sat on the table between us. I wanted to scream, but the air in the house had become too thin to breathe. Then came the invasion. Marla arrived on a Tuesday, not to visit, but to edit. She walked through my living room, moving vases and adjusting curtains with a critical sneer. "This room feels so closed off," Marla said, shifting my favorite armchair into a corner where it looked ridiculous. "Graham needs space. He needs energy. You have cluttered this place up with so much mediocrity." She treated me like a temporary house sitter who had overstayed her welcome, but she was subtle compared to Raina Blake. Raina was an interior designer Graham had hired for a consultation. She walked into my home without knocking, wearing heels that cost more than my first car. She was young, sharp, and looked at me with the blank disinterest one might have for a piece of old wallpaper. "The lighting in here is tragic," Raina said, holding up a fabric swatch against the wall, her back turned to me. "We need to gut this entire floor. Open concept. Graham says he feels trapped." Graham stood next to her, nodding, mesmerized. He did not introduce us. He did not apologize. He just looked annoyed that I was standing in the foyer, occupying space that he wanted to renovate. "Can you just go somewhere?" Claire Graham asked, waving a hand vaguely. "We are trying to work." I grabbed my purse and fled. I drove aimlessly for an hour before ending up at Jenna Price's house. Jenna was my oldest friend in town. She was the one person I thought I could trust. We sat on her patio, drinking white wine, and I let it all spill out. I told her about the passwords, the truck, Raina, the feeling that I was being erased from my own life. Jenna listened, leaning forward, her eyes wide, but she did not offer a tissue. She did not say, "Poor you." "So, who is the lawyer?" Jenna asked, her voice tight. "Have you hired one yet? Did you find any hidden accounts before he locked you out? You need to tell me if you have a stash." "Claire, you have to be smart. I haven't hired anyone yet," I said, wiping my eyes. "I am scared. Jenna, I think he is going to leave me with nothing. Does he know you know about the debt she pressed? Did you tell him you looked at the tax returns? It felt like an interrogation, but I was too desperate for connection to notice the red flags. I told her everything. I told her I was terrified of a custody battle. I told her I was thinking of hiring a forensic accountant. The next morning, the trap snapped shut. I was making toast for Ethan when Graham walked in. He was whistling. He stopped at the island and looked at me with a cold, triumphant grin. "So," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, "I hear you are looking for a forensic accountant. That is an expensive move for someone who complains about the price of strawberries." I froze. The knife I was using to butter the toast clattered onto the plate. I had never said those words to Graham. I had only said them to Jenna, in the privacy of her backyard, less than 12 hours ago. Graham leaned in close, smelling of expensive cologne and betrayal. "You have no friends. Claire, you have no resources. Stop fighting. You are just going to hurt yourself." He walked out the door, laughing. I stood in the silence of the kitchen. The shock washed over me, cold and numbing, but then it receded. In its place, something else began to burn. It was not sadness. It was clarity. He thought he had isolated me. He thought using Jenna to spy on me would break my spirit. He was wrong. He had just revealed his playbook. He showed me exactly how he was getting his information. If they want to play spy games, I thought, picking up the knife and wiping the butter from the blade, then I will become the director. It was 2 a.m. when I finally found the crack in Graham's armor. He was asleep in the master bedroom, snoring with the heavy, arrogant rhythm of a man who believes he is untouchable. I was huddled in the guest room closet with my old laptop, the one he thought I had recycled years ago. Graham had locked me out of the main banking portals and changed the passwords to the cloud accounting software. He thought that was enough. He forgot that 4 years ago. I had set up a redundant backup server for our subcontractor invoices, a legacy system he considered too boring to remember. It was slow, clunky, and currently mirroring every single transaction from the main database. I watched the screen populate with data. It was not just a spreadsheet. It was an autopsy. The first thing that caught my eye was a recurring monthly payment of $12,000 to a company called K Consulting Group. I ran the tax ID. It traced back to a registered agent address that matched the law firm of Howard Klein. Graham was not just paying his lawyer legal fees, he was funneling cash out of the company into a shell entity. "You are stealing from yourself," I whispered to the glowing screen, my voice trembling in the dark. I dug deeper. I pulled up the property records for our house. I knew we had a mortgage, but the screen showed 3 active liens. There was the primary mortgage, a secondary home equity line of credit for $200,000, and a high-interest private loan taken out 6 months ago. I clicked on the scanned documents. My name was signed at the bottom of every page. I traced the signature on the screen with my finger. It was a good forgery, but the loop on the capital C was too tight. I had never signed those papers. Graham had committed bank fraud and used me as the co-conspirator. Then I looked at the projects. The numbers for the new shopping center bid were impossible. He had bid $3 million on a job that required $4 million in materials and labor just to break even. He had underbid to feed his ego, to get the headline, to be the big man who won the contract. I followed the cash flow. He was taking the deposit money from the shopping center project and using it to pay the overdue lumber bills from the last 3 houses we built. "It's a Ponzi scheme," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow to the chest. "Graham, you absolute fool." It got worse. I found a folder labeled IRS correspondence that had been scanned and hidden deep in a subdirectory. I opened the PDF. It was a final notice for unpaid payroll taxes. He had stopped paying the government the withholding tax for our employees 5 quarters ago. My hands started to shake, but not from fear. It was a cold, vibrating rage. Unpaid payroll taxes were not a civil dispute. That was a felony. The IRS could pierce the corporate veil. They could come after personal assets, They could come after me. I opened the supplier contracts next. Every single major vendor agreement had a personal guarantee clause. Graham had signed them. He had pledged our personal assets, the house, the cars, the savings to cover the business debts. The picture was complete, and it was terrifying. Vance Ridge Development was not a company. It was a corpse that Graham was pumping full of air to make it look alive. If this collapsed while we were still married, I would be liable for everything. The fraud, the tax evasion, the debt. I would go to prison, or I would spend the rest of my life paying for his vanity. I knew what I had to do. I did not cry. Tears were a luxury I could not afford. I began to print. I printed everything. The forged mortgage documents, the tax notices, the evidence of the shell company payments. I did not trust the cloud. I needed paper. The printer hummed softly, a rhythmic whir click that sounded like ammunition being loaded into a magazine. I organized the documents into 3 piles. I scanned them to an encrypted external hard drive and taped it to the underside of the guest room dresser. Then I made one final transaction. I logged into the one joint personal savings account he had not drained yet. It had $18,000 in it. It was not much, but it was clean money. I transferred every cent into an irrevocable trust I had set up for Ethan years ago, a 529 college fund that was legally untouchable by creditors or divorce settlements. I stared at the zero balance on the screen. "I am sorry, Graham," I whispered, closing the laptop, "but I have to let you win. I have to let you take it all, because it is the only way I survive." I crept back into bed and lay next to the man who had unknowingly built a prison for himself. He shifted in his sleep, flinging an arm over his eyes. "Just wait," I breathed into the darkness. "Just wait until you see the bill." Simone Reyes did not keep tissues on her desk. She kept a pristine glass surface and a fountain pen that looked like a weapon. She was not the kind of lawyer you hired to mediate a friendly separation. She was the kind you hired to burn the village down. I sat across from her, placing my stack of stolen documents on the glass. "I do not want to fight for 50%. Simone," I said, my voice steady, "I want to give him everything." Simone stopped clicking her pen. She looked at me with a sharp, skeptical, arched eyebrow. "You hired the wrong attorney if you want to be a martyr. Mrs. Vance, I do not do charity work for cheating husbands." "It is not charity," I said, sliding the file toward her. "Look at page 4 and page 12 and the tax returns on the bottom." Simone opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the pages with the speed of a machine. She saw the unauthorized loans. She saw the payroll tax evasion. She saw the shell company payments to Howard Klein. Her expression shifted from boredom to predatory focus. She closed the folder and leaned back, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. "I see," Simone said softly. "This is not a portfolio. This is a crime scene." "Exactly," I replied. "The company is insolvent. The house is leveraged beyond its value. If I fight for half, I am fighting for half of a debt that will bury me. I need to get out before the roof collapses. I want him to take full ownership of the assets and full ownership of the liabilities." Simone nodded, pulling a yellow legal pad toward her. "We are going to construct a settlement that looks like a surrender. We will draft an indemnification clause that is absolute. It will state that Graham Vance assumes all past, present, and future debts associated with the business and the marital estate. In exchange, you will waive your right to the company shares. He will sign it," I said. "He thinks the company is worth millions. He thinks I am just too stupid to understand high finance." "We need a sweetener," Simone said, tapping the pen against the glass. "We will ask for a lump sum, let's say $150,000. It is enough to look like you are grabbing cash and running, but low enough that he will think he is getting a bargain. It plays into his ego. He gets the empire. You get grocery money. There is one more thing," I added. "He is terrified of an audit. He knows the books are cooked. Perfect. Simone said, her eyes gleaming. We will threaten a full forensic audit as part of the discovery process. We will demand to see every receipt from the last 5 years. He will panic. Then, we will offer him a waiver. We will let him sign a document stating that he is the one refusing the audit to expedite the divorce proceedings. We will frame it as him saving his reputation from a messy public trial. He will be so relieved to keep his secrets hidden that he will not read the fine print on the debt transfer. I have a way to make him move faster. I said, I can leak the fear to him. I have a friend. Or someone who thinks she is my friend. Simone looked at me, assessing my ability to pull this off. You have to sell this. Claire, you cannot look smug. You cannot look like you have a plan. You have to look broken. You have to look like a woman who is terrified of him and just wants to escape with her life. I can do that, I said. I have been practicing being invisible for 10 years. Good. Simone stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Because for this to work, Graham cannot suspect he is walking into a trap. He has to believe. That he is robbing you. I left her office and drove straight to Jenna's house. I needed to deliver the performance of my life. I walked into Jenna's kitchen, making sure my shoulders were slumped and my eyes were red. Oh my God. Claire, Jenna said, pouring me a glass of wine before I even sat down. What happened? It's over. Jenna, I choked out, forcing my voice to tremble. I can't do it. My lawyer, she says he is going to destroy me in court. She wants to do a full audit, but I told her no. I just want $50,000 and my freedom. I don't care about the company. I don't care about the house. I just want him to leave me alone. Jenna's eyes widened. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, calculating how quickly she could text Graham the good news. Are you sure? Jenna asked, feigning concern while her hand inched toward her phone. You deserve more than that. No, I whispered, staring at the floor. I am too tired to fight. If he gives me a little cash, I will sign whatever he wants. Please. Just don't tell anyone I am giving up. I won't tell a soul, Jenna said, patting my hand. 10 minutes after I left her house. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Graham's lawyer. They wanted to schedule a settlement meeting for the next morning. The bait had been taken. Graham thought he had broken me. He had no idea he was sprinting toward a cliff. I needed to be absolutely certain before I pulled the trigger. I had to know exactly how fast the pipeline between Jenna's ears and Graham's phone really was. So I invited her for coffee on a rainy Tuesday afternoon and fed her a poison pill wrapped in sugar. We sat in the back corner of a noisy cafe. I stirred my latte, looking down at the table with feigned nervousness. Jenna, can I trust you? I asked, keeping my voice low. Of course, honey, Jenna said, leaning in, her eyes hungry for drama. You can tell me anything. I found something, I whispered. While I was packing some boxes in the attic, I found an old savings bond my grandmother left me. It was in a book I had forgotten about. It matured last month. It is worth about $25,000. It was a lie. There was no bond. There was no grandmother who left me money. But Jenna did not know that. I saw a spark in her eyes, not of happiness for me, but of calculation. She licked her lips. That is amazing. Claire, she said, her voice a little too high. Does Graham know no? I said quickly, gripping her hand. And he can't know. This money is my escape fund. Please, Jenna, promise me. I promise, she said, squeezing my hand back. My lips are sealed. 3 hours later, Graham stormed into the house. He did not even take off his coat. He marched into the kitchen where I was chopping vegetables and slammed his hand on the counter. Where is it? He demanded. Where is what I asked? Keeping my back to him to hide the small, satisfied smile that formed on my face. The bond. Claire, he shouted, his face flushing red. the $25,000 you are hiding from the marital assets. You think you can cheat me? That is community property." I turned around, letting my face fall into a mask of shock. How did you know I have my ways?" he sneered. "You are not as clever as you think." He was right. I was not clever. I was surgical. Jenna was no longer my friend. She was a weapon, and now that I knew exactly how she worked, I was going to aim her straight at Graham's chest. I did not confront her. I did not block her number. I needed her to keep the channel open for one last message. The next morning, the day before our scheduled mediation, I sent the text that would end my marriage. I waited until 10 o'clock, when I knew Graham would be in his office, stressed and caffeinated. I typed the message to Jenna with shaking hands, but only because the adrenaline was hitting me hard. "Jenna, I am panicking. Simone just called. She says we have to do a full forensic audit of the company. She thinks Graham is hiding money. She wants to subpoena the bank records going back 5 years. I told her I just want to settle, but she says we have to dig. I am so scared he is going to be furious." I hit send. I imagined the scene on the other side of town. I imagined Jenna's phone lighting up. I imagined her frantic text to Graham. "She is auditing you. They are looking at the last 5 years. It must have hit Graham like a heart attack. He knew exactly what a forensic audit would find. It would find the shell company. It would find the unpaid payroll taxes. It would find the fraud. If an auditor looked at his books, he would not just lose the divorce. He would go to federal prison. An hour later, my lawyer called me. Simone sounded amused. "You are not going to believe this," Simone said. "Graham's lawyer just called. They want to skip the discovery phase entirely. They are demanding we sign the settlement today. They are even waiving their right to audit your personal accounts if we waive the audit on the business." "He is running scared," I said. "He is sprinting," Simone corrected. "But Klein—" His lawyer sounded hesitant. "I think Klein tried to warn him that waiving discovery is dangerous, but Graham is driving the bus." In Graham's office, the conversation must have been brutal. I could picture Howard Klein trying to do his job, trying to protect his client from his own stupidity. "Graham, you cannot sign this without seeing her financials," Klein would say. "We need to know what she has." "I don't care what she has," Graham would scream, sweating through his shirt, terrified of the IRS agents that existed only in his mind. "I want this done. Howard, I want her out, and I want the company secured. No audits. No delays. Draw up the waiver, but—" "Sir." "You work for me," Graham would bellow, slamming his fist on the desk. "Do as I say." The mediation room was a sterile glass box that smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and aggressive cologne. The air conditioner hummed with a low, headache-inducing drone. Graham sat at the head of the long oak table, sprawling in his chair with his legs stretched out. He looked like a king holding court, but I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. I sat opposite him, shrinking into my chair, keeping my eyes fixed on the grain of the wood. I made myself look small. I made myself look like a woman who had already lost. Howard Klein, Graham's lawyer, was the only person in the room who actually wanted to do his job. He was flipping through the proposed settlement agreement, his brow furrowed. "Graham," Klein said, lowering his voice but keeping it firm, "I really must advise against skipping the valuation. We need to appraise the business assets properly to protect you from future claims. If we rush this, the court might question the validity of the agreement later." Graham's head snapped toward his lawyer. The vein in his neck pulsed. He was terrified of the audit I had threatened via Jenna. He thought that if we paused for a valuation, the forensic accountants would come marching in. "We are not doing a valuation." "Howard," Graham said, his voice tight. "I told you, I want a clean break." Today, I looked up slowly, widening my eyes in feigned confusion. I turned to Simone, then looked across at Graham. "But if we do the audit," I said, letting my voice trail off into a whisper. If we check the books, will I finally know where the money went? Because I just want to understand why we were always broke. The color drained from Graham's face. My question was a direct hit. He thought I was fishing for the truth about his fraud. He slammed his hand down on the table, making the water pitcher rattle. "There is nothing to understand," Claire Graham shouted, standing up. "Business is complicated. You wouldn't understand it anyway. Look, I am done with this. I am done with you dragging your feet." He turned to Simone, his eyes wild. $175,000. Graham barked. "I will give her a lump sum of $175,000. Cash. Transferable within 48 hours, but she signs the waiver now. Right now, no audits, no looking back. She walks away. It was $25,000 more than we had planned to ask for. He was paying a premium for his own execution." Simone sat back, crossing her arms. She looked unimpressed. She was playing her part perfectly. "I don't know. Mr. Vance," Simone said coolly. "My client has a right to full discovery. We believe the company is worth significantly more. If we go to trial, no trial." Graham yelled, his voice cracking. I don't have time for a trial. My reputation. The business can't handle the rumors. Take the deal. Claire, take the money and get out of my life." I looked at him, letting a tear slip down my cheek. It was a tear of pure joy. But to him, it looked like surrender. "Okay," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Okay. I will take it. Please, just stop yelling." Graham exhaled, a sound of massive relief. He slumped back into his chair. "Draw it up! Howard! Now!" Klein looked at his client like he was watching a man jump off a bridge, but he nodded. He typed the final figures into his laptop and hit print. Whir, click, whir. The sound of the printer in the corner of the room was the only noise in the silence. It sounded mechanical and final. It sounded like the jaws of a steel trap ratcheting open. Klein slid the document across the table. It was thick. The indemnification clause, the paragraph that transferred all his debt, all his fraud, and all his tax evasion solely to him, was buried on page 12. The schedule of liabilities was attached as Exhibit C, which he had not even glanced at. Graham grabbed the pen. He did not read a single word. He did not even skim it. He just wanted to stop the audit. He signed his name with a violent, slashing motion, Graham Vance. He pushed the papers toward me. His eyes were bright with victory. "Your turn," he sneered. I took the pen. My hand did not shake. I signed my name below his. But I did not sign as Claire Vance. I wrote the name I had not used in 14 years. Claire Whitman. It was a legal requirement for the divorce decree, but it felt like I was cutting the last rope holding me to a sinking ship. "Done," Simone said, snapping the folder shut and pulling our copy off the table before Graham could change his mind. We stood up. Graham did not say goodbye. He grabbed his briefcase and marched out of the room, eager to go celebrate his win. I walked out into the hallway with Simone. My legs felt weak, but my head was clear. Just ahead of us, near the elevators, I saw Marla. She was on her phone, her back to us, her voice loud and echoing in the marble corridor. "Oh, it is over. Darling." Marla was practically shouting into her cell phone, unaware that I was standing 10 feet behind her. Graham crushed her. He got everything, the house, the business. She just took a little payout and ran like the coward she is. "We are going to pop champagne tonight." Yes. He kept it all. I stopped and looked at Simone. A small, dark smile touched my lips. Marla was right. He had kept it all. He had kept every single cent of the disaster he had created. They were going to pop champagne on the deck of the Titanic, and they had no idea the iceberg was already in the hull. The morning of the final hearing was painted in shades of slate gray. The courthouse hallway smelled of industrial lemon floor wax and coffee that had been burning on a hot plate for 3 hours. It was a scent I would forever associate with the end of my life as Mrs. Graham Vance. I sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 4, hands folded in my lap, wearing a beige suit that made me blend into the peeling paint of the walls. I was a chameleon. I was a ghost. Graham arrived 10 minutes early. He did not look like a man facing the dissolution of his family. He looked like a candidate on election day. He wore a navy suit with a silk pocket square, his hair gelled into a helmet of confidence. He bounced on the balls of his feet, chatting with Howard Klein, slapping his lawyer on the back with a jovial force that made Klein wince. Graham thought he had already won. To him, this hearing was just a formality, a rubber stamp on his victory lap. A few feet away, leaning against the radiator, stood Raina. She was scrolling through her phone, her long acrylic nails clicking against the screen. She looked bored. She did not look at Graham with love. She looked at him like he was a credit card that had finally been approved. She was probably already ordering furniture for the living room I had designed. Inside the courtroom, Marla sat in the front row of the gallery. She caught my eye and offered a tight, pitying smile. It was the look one gives to a stray dog that is being taken away by animal control. She sat with her purse clutched on her lap, ready to witness my expulsion from the kingdom. When the bailiff called our case, we stood. Judge Holloway looked tired. He adjusted his glasses and peered down at the settlement agreement that lay thick and heavy on his bench. "This is an expedited settlement," Judge Holloway said, his voice dry. "You have waived the standard discovery period and financial auditing. I want to make sure both parties understand the finality of this document." He looked at me first. "Mrs. Whitman," he said, "using my maiden name as requested in the filing, you are agreeing to accept a lump sum of $175,000 in exchange for waiving all claims to the marital assets, including the primary residence, the vacation property, and the business entity known as Vance Ridge Development. You understand that you cannot come back later and ask for more, even if the value of these assets increases." I stood up, gripping the edge of the table to steady my hands. I had to sell the fear one last time. "Yes." "Your Honor," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I understand. I just want to move on." Graham scoffed softly next to me, a sound of derision he did not bother to hide. The judge turned his gaze to Graham. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, "you are requesting full ownership of all assets listed in Exhibit A. Is that correct?" "That is correct, Your Honor," Graham said, his voice booming. He buttoned his suit jacket, standing tall. "I built this business. I built that house. It is only right that I keep them." Judge Holloway flipped a page. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly as he read the indemnification clause Simone and I had drafted. "You understand, sir." The judge continued, looking over the rim of his glasses, that by accepting full ownership of these entities, you are also accepting full sole responsibility for all liabilities attached to them. This includes mortgages, lines of credit, business loans, tax obligations, and any other debts, known or unknown. It was the warning label on the bottle of poison. A smarter man would have paused. A smarter man would have asked to see the schedule of debts again. But Graham was not listening to the words. He was listening to the sound of his own ego. He treated the judge's warning like the terms and conditions page on a software update, something to scroll past so he could click agree. "Yes, yes, Your Honor," Graham said, waving a hand dismissively. "I understand the business better than anyone. I accept all responsibility. Let's just get this done." Klein, his lawyer, shifted uncomfortably. He opened his mouth as if to intervene, to perhaps suggest one last look at the debt schedule, but Graham shot him a glare that silenced him. "Very well," the judge said. He picked up his stamp. I held my breath. On the table in front of us lay the final addendum. It was right there, in black and white. Exhibit C. It listed the 3 mortgages. It listed the personal guarantees. It listed the payroll tax arrears. It listed the toxic loans. Graham had signed it without reading it, and now he had just sworn under oath that he accepted it all. The judge's hand came down. Thump. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a gavel. But to me, it sounded like the bolt sliding home on a prison cell door. Graham smiled, wide and bright, turning to look at Marla in the audience and giving her a thumbs up. He had no idea he was already a dead man walking. It took exactly 48 hours for the kingdom to crumble. Graham was likely still hungover from his victory champagne when the first domino fell. Since I was no longer intercepting the mail or screening the calls, the reality of his financial situation hit him with the force of a freight train. The suppliers stopped being polite. They had been waiting on checks for 90 days, and without me there to charm them or negotiate payment plans, they simply cut him off. The lumber yard froze his credit. The concrete company filed a lien. Then came the letter from the IRS regarding the unpaid payroll taxes. It did not go to the pile of papers I used to hide in the bottom drawer. It went right to his desk. I heard about the house through the grapevine of our small town. Graham, desperate for liquid cash to plug the holes in the business, called a realtor to list the estate. He walked around the property, boasting about the equity he was about to unlock. He told the agent he expected to walk away with at least $800,000. The title search came back the next morning. It must have been a horrific phone call. The agent had to explain to Graham that between the primary mortgage, the home equity line of credit, and the private high-interest loans he had taken out to cover his gambling on new projects, the house was underwater. He did not own a mansion. He owned a debt of $2.2 million on a house worth $1.8 million. He could not sell it without bringing a check for $400,000 to the closing table. Raina Blake did not wait for the foreclosure notice. She was a woman who understood return on investment, and she realized very quickly that Graham was a bad stock. She did not scream or fight. She just evaporated. Graham came home on a Thursday to find her side of the closet empty. The expensive espresso machine was gone, along with the jewelry he had bought her using the company credit card. She blocked his number and deleted her social media photos of them together. She loved the lifestyle, not the man. And without the lifestyle, Graham was just a middle-aged contractor with a bad temper and a mountain of debt. Then came the phone calls to me. Marla was the first to break. The woman who had looked at me with such disdain in the courtroom suddenly remembered we were family. She called my cell phone 3 times in a row. When that failed, she called the house line of the small rental apartment I had moved into. Ethan picked up. I watched my son from the kitchen table. He looked older, calmer. He listened to his grandmother frantically explain that Graham was just stressed and that I needed to come home and fix the books for the sake of the family legacy. "Grandma," Ethan said, his voice flat and firm, "Mom isn't the maid, and she isn't the bank. You guys wanted him to be the king. Well, long live the king." He hung up the phone and went back to his homework. It was the proudest moment of my life. Jenna was next. She sent a text message, seemingly forgetting that she was the one who had helped destroy my marriage. "Claire, I heard things are messy. I feel terrible. We should grab a drink and talk. I miss you." I looked at the screen. I did not feel anger. I felt nothing. I deleted the message and blocked the number. Graham, predictable to the end, tried to sue. He hired a new lawyer because Howard Klein had fired him as a client for non-payment. He filed a motion to overturn the settlement, claiming fraud. He argued that he had been misled about the true state of the finances and that I had entrapped him into signing the waiver. It was a suicide mission. Simone Reyes simply submitted the transcript from the hearing. She highlighted the section where Judge Holloway asked Graham if he understood he was accepting all known and unknown debts. She highlighted Graham's arrogant, dismissive response. "Yes. Yes, Your Honor." I understand the business better than anyone. The judge dismissed Graham's motion in less than 15 minutes. "Mr. Vance," the judge had apparently said, according to the court minutes, You cannot claim you were tricked into buying a lemon when you are the mechanic who built the car. You waived your right to discovery. You waived your right to an audit. You told this court you knew everything. The settlement stands. To add salt to the wound, the judge ordered Graham to pay my legal fees for the frivolous motion. It was another $5,000 he did not have. My life, by contrast, was quiet. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment near Ethan's school. The walls were thin, and the view was of a parking lot, but the air inside was light. I got a job as a bookkeeper for a local bakery. The pay was modest, but the checks didn't bounce. I slept 8 hours a night. I remember sitting on my small balcony one evening, drinking tea that cost pennies, listening to the distant sound of traffic. I owned nothing but my freedom. Yet I felt richer than I ever had in the mansion on the hill. Graham had kept the trophies, but I had kept my life. And looking at Ethan laughing at a video game in the living room, I knew I had won the only thing that actually mattered. The moment the ink dried, the silence in the courtroom broke. It did not break with a cheer. It broke with a whisper from Howard Klein that sounded like a death sentence. "Graham," Klein murmured, pointing a shaking finger at the bottom of the page my husband had just signed. The indemnification clause. "You just personally guaranteed the corporate debt." Graham looked down. His eyes scanned the paper, finally reading the words he had been too arrogant to check. He saw the list of liabilities attached to the assets. He saw the $2.2 million in negative equity. He saw the unpaid payroll taxes. He saw the personal guarantees that now bypassed the corporate shield and latched directly onto his Social Security number. He realized he had not just signed a divorce settlement, he had signed a confession. The color vanished from his face. He stood up so fast his chair scraped violently against the floor. "No," Graham shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "No, she set me up. This isn't right. She cooked the books. She managed the money. This is her debt too." Judge Holloway did not even blink. He leaned forward, looking over his spectacles with the patience of a man who had seen 1,000 liars try to outrun their own lies. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, his voice calm and steely. "5 minutes ago, you stood before this court and stated that you understood the business better than anyone. You stated that you wanted to waive the audit to protect your reputation. You demanded a quick ruling. But she tricked me," Graham stammered, pointing a trembling finger at me. She knew the company was underwater. She offered you full discovery," the judge interrupted, cutting him off. "And you declined it. You insisted on speed. You insisted on ownership. You cannot ask for the crown and then complain that it is too heavy." Graham looked at his lawyer, begging for a lifeline. Klein stared at the table, refusing to make eye contact. He had warned Graham. He had tried to stop the pen. He was done. In the gallery. Marla sat with her hand over her mouth. She was not a financial genius, but she understood the look of a man who had just lost everything. She realized there would be no champagne tonight. There would only be bankruptcy lawyers and liquidation sales. I stood up slowly. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I looked at the man I had spent 14 years protecting, the man who had erased me to feed his own ego. I did not hide anything. "Graham," I said softly, my voice carrying clearly across the quiet room. "I just stopped saving you." Graham opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and terrifying realization. He finally saw me. He saw the woman who had kept the wolves at the door for a decade, and he realized that by kicking me out, he had let the wolves in. Judge Holloway raised his gavel. "The settlement is approved as signed." The judge declared, "Mr. Vance retains sole ownership of all assets and all liabilities listed. Court is adjourned." Bang! The sound of the gavel was final. I picked up my purse and turned my back on him. I walked down the center aisle, past Marla, past Raina, who had already fled days ago, and out the double doors. I did not look back. I did not need to see him crumble. I knew exactly what was happening behind me. Graham was standing there, holding the keys to a kingdom that was already burning to the ground. A year later, I heard he was still fighting the lawsuits. He was living in a small apartment Marla paid for, dodging calls from the IRS and the bank. He had everything he wanted. He had the business, he had the name, and he had the consequences. I walked to my car, the sun feeling warm on my face. My phone was silent. No debt collectors were calling me. My son's college fund was safe. My conscience was clear. Some people think revenge is about making the other person suffer. They are wrong. Revenge is simply stepping out of the way and letting gravity do its work. There are some divorces that are not a loss. They are the moment you finally let someone choose their own punishment. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on Graham's karma. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help more people hear this story. See you in the next one.